All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this meeting to order for September the 8th, 2015. Will you rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you bow your heads with me for a brief prayer? Father God, I come to you tonight, and there are two things that I definitely want to pray for this evening. Tragically, we had one of our Public Works crew members lose his wife, and we pray for his family, and we pray for their two sons. May they find peace, Lord, and may you comfort them in their time of need. I'd also like to pray for Mr. David Yale. He has been instrumental in the Rising Sun Little League for many years, and Mr. Yale tragically found out that his body is overrun by cancer. We know that you can heal all, God, and hopefully you will touch your hand on him and heal him. I ask for you to continue to protect the town of Rising Sun and to continue to lead this board in a Christ-like way. I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. First on the agenda is approval of minutes from the August 25th, 2015 town meeting.
I'm gonna make a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. Next, Town Administrator, do you have a reporting of an executive meeting from August the 25th?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The mayor and commissioners met in executive session on August 25th, 2015. They met at 8:03 p.m. A motion to open the meeting. The meeting was actually called for at the conclusion of the last town meeting, so the proper motions and seconds were made at that meeting. Commissioner Scully made that motion at the meeting, seconded by Commissioner Warnick, and that vote was 4-0. The citation of reason for the executive session was, one, to discuss personnel, the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom it has jurisdiction. The second reason for the meeting was to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice. The third reason for the meeting was to consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation. The topics discussed at that meeting were the findings of an independent investigation into employee grievances filed against Commissioner Walker, and the second was to discuss a tort claim filed against the town by one of the police officers. The persons at the meeting was Jay Gullo, the town attorney. The other person was Calvin A. Bonneberger Jr., the town administrator. The actions taken at the meeting, a motion was made by Commissioner Scully, seconded by Commissioner Arthurreath, to accept the resignation of Commissioner George Walker effective immediately. That vote passed 3-0. A second motion was made by Commissioner Arthurreath, seconded by Commissioner Warnick, to censure Commissioner Walker as provided for in the town charter for improper conduct with personnel. That motion passed 3-0. A motion was made by Commissioner Scully, seconded by Commissioner Warnick, to leave executive session. That motion passed 3-0. A motion was made by Commissioner Arthurreath, seconded by Commissioner Scully, to adjourn the meeting. That motion passed by a vote of 3-0, and the meeting was adjourned at 10:17 p.m.
Thank you, Town Administrator. Next on the agenda is public presentations, and we have a swearing in of our new sergeant. So Chris, if you could join us up here behind the seal, myself and Commissioner Scully. If you want to go ahead, Commissioner Scully.
I'd like to give some background. Christopher David Serkis. We're happy to have him on board. He's a retired sergeant with 20 years of service in Baltimore City. Also served as academic instructor in the Baltimore Training Academy, has specialized in community service, which is community policing, and he's involved with the Rising Sun Little League and Perryville football. So we're happy to, I'll let you pass.
Raise your right hand. will support the Constitution. Go ahead. Do you want him to read this? You want me to read it? Okay. Okay. Do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland and support the Constitution and laws thereof. I will be faithful
I will
and
be
bear
faithful
true allegiance
and bear true allegiance
to the state of
to the
Maryland
state of Maryland
and support the Constitution and laws thereof.
and support the Constitution and laws thereof.
And I will,
And I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently
diligently
and faithfully,
and faithfully,
without partiality
without partiality
or prejudice,
or prejudice,
execute the office of Rising Sun Police Officer
execute the office of Rising Sun Police Officer
according to the constitutions and laws of this state.
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And this is for you. This is signed by myself and Commissioner Skelly. Thank you. Congratulations, Chris. Thank you. Next is Resolution 2015-07, which is a personnel manual revision.
I'll present it.
Town Administrator, if you'd like to present it.
Board, this is a resolution for your consideration. Under the guidelines of resolutions, it is something that you can submit tonight and formally vote on. This resolution is, if you remember in our budget discussions, we talked about ironing out the way overtime is classified here, how it's paid out, and the on-call status. And our personnel manual was silent, and we were operating on hand-me-down policies over the years that have the potential to get us into trouble. So as required in our town code, the Board of Commissioners has the ability to create rules and regulations for personnel, and you do that by the form of a resolution is how you make those changes. You already have a personnel manual. The changes to the personnel manual are done by resolution. So what you have in front of you tonight is Resolution 2015-07, titled A Resolution titled Overtime Compensation for Employees, a resolution outlining the process of overtime compensation, comp time, and on-call/call-in provisions for all employees. Whereas the Commissioners of Rising Sun, Maryland, the town, is a municipal corporation duly organized and existing under the laws of the state of Maryland, pursuant to a charter adopted in accordance with Article XE-E of the Constitution of Maryland and Section 4-201 of the Local Government Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland as amended, whereas the town is proclaimed as a perpetual entity with the right to pass laws. And whereas Chapter 2 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Rising Sun, Article 3, Section 2-304, titled General Personal Rules, authorizes the Board of Commissioners to adopt by resolution a code of personnel rules and regulations. Such code may contain a job description and classification system for town employees, basic annual rates of pay for each such classification, longevity pay rates, if any, hours of work, overtime compensation, designation of holidays, holiday pay, annual leave and sick leave benefits, and a description of any additional fringe benefits for any such classification or classifications. The code may also prescribe rules concerning promotion, demotion, discharge, voluntary separation, and describing grievances and appeal procedures for such classified employees, and any other rules and regulations the Board of Commissioners from time to time may deem necessary. And whereas the Mayor and Commissioners of the Town of Rising Sun wish to amend this personnel manual, more specifically Chapter 5 titled Compensation, Section 5-6 titled Overtime Compensation, and whereas the Mayor and Commissioners of the Town of Rising Sun wish to more clearly describe the policies on overtime compensation, who is entitled to such compensation, comp time, on-call status, and the compensation for being on call, and therefore be it enacted and resolved that the Mayor and Commissioners of the Town of Rising Sun introduced the attached document titled Personnel Rules and Regulation Manual Revisions and Amendments 98-15 on this 8th day of September 2015. Now, the actual amendment and the way it would look like in the document, I'll just give you basically the summary of that. Currently, right now, you see the language that is written in black is essentially the way the code is written right now. And one of the problems with it is it only addresses exempt. And when I say exempt, it's employees that are not exempt. It's employees that are not exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act on overtime. In other words, not to get into all the details of it, but essentially if you manage more than one employee, you're typically not provided under the Fair Labor Standards Act a guarantee of overtime for hours worked above and beyond a certain number. And in our existing personnel manual, we only address employees that are expected to work 40 hours a week. And under the Fair Labor Standards Act, police officers and firefighters are classified differently. And I believe that police and firefighters can work upwards of the high 80s of hours and a pay period. And pay period is described as whenever you decide to pay your employees. In our case, we pay our employees every 2 weeks. And so what we decided to do years ago as a compromise is pay our police officers if they work, pay them overtime if they work more than 84 hours compared to our regular employees working 80 hours before they get overtime. And that's 80 hours in a 2-week period. This is something that we've been doing for probably about 5 years now, but it's never been clearly addressed in the personnel manual. The personnel manual has only said 40 hours. So this language you have here makes it clear that non-exempt employees and the police sergeant shall be compensated at a rate of 1.5 times for each hour worked over 40 hours in accordance to the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act. All full-time police officers shall be compensated at a rate of 1.5 times for each hour worked over 84 hours. It talks about all overtime compensation shall be paid out in the pay period in which they occur. Again, some of this language is as a result of some of the issues that we had a couple of years ago, back in 2010 through 11. Management exempt employees shall be entitled to 1 hour of comp time for each hour worked over 40 hours. In other words, the Fair Labor Standards Act says that employees that are covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act are entitled to 1.5 hours per every hour that they work. But employees that are not covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act are not, one, they're not guaranteed comp time. It's up to the employer to determine that and the rate. And we typically have been doing 1 hour of comp time for every additional hour worked above the 40 hours. So that's being clarified. The other thing that's being clarified is that under the Fair Labor Standards Act, you are entitled to overtime only once you have actually worked 40 hours, and this gets lost a lot. If an employee is out sick, if an employee takes a personal day, if an employee takes vacation time, they technically have not worked a complete 40 hours, so they would have to work 40 hours plus whatever hours they took off for vacation and personal time before they would get that time and a half. It's not that they don't get paid, they just don't get paid at the time and a half rate. What this is proposing, which is what we have always done, is that if an employee takes a prearranged vacation time off or personal time off, and they get called in after hours to take care of a sewer break or something like that, we don't, in essence, penalize them because they had a scheduled day or time off. And quite frankly, if they call in sick during the week and they have to work the weekend, we don't hold that against them. What we are trying to cut down on, because again, this is taxpayers' money, is that if one of our employees is supposed to work a weekend to cover the sewer plant or the water plant, I think it's not unreasonable for us to expect that employee to schedule their vacation time during a week that they're not scheduled to work the overtime. For instance, you can have an employee that's supposed to work the 6 hours on Saturday and Sunday. There's nothing now stopping them from taking the whole week off, coming in on Saturday and Sunday to work those additional 6 hours, and you're paying them time and a half. So we want to create policies that basically tells the employee, nah, that's pushing it too far. If you had a personal day or pre-scheduled and overtime came up, that's one thing, but you can't coordinate it so you're off and then get paid overtime when you come in. So that's what this resolution aims to do in here. The other thing is that it has been an unwritten rule here that, and this mainly affects our public works employees, because our public works employees are the ones who always have to respond when there's a sewer break or a water leak. And so we've always had someone who's on call, and the 4 employees rotate on a weekly basis who will be on call during that week. And in the past, we have paid that employee 4 hours for simply being on call, and if they don't get called in at any time, they still get that 4 hours. What we're proposing to do is to make it where you are on call. If you get called in, you will get a minimum of 4 hours straight time, regardless of how long it takes to perform the task that you've been called in to do, unless that task takes you long enough that if you were to get time and a half, you would make more money. So in other words, I think the cutoff point is an hour and a half. So if we call a public works employee in here to unlock the front door because there's a meeting that was supposed to be held, and I'm being facetious when I say that, under this rule, they would get paid 4 hours for calling in for that, for coming in for that inconvenience. But if they go out and fix a complaint from a resident and they're there for 2 hours, they would get 2 hours of time and a half, not 4 hours of call-in time. So it's whichever is the greater of the two is what they would pay them. And so when we looked at our budget numbers, because again, we're trying to hold the line on our budget, when we looked at our statistics, more often than not, we are paying these employees to be on call, and they don't have any events that brings them in. So the town was paying in like an excess of $10,000–$15,000 a year across the board for this being on call, and a good number of those times they never had to come in as a result of it. So again, in order to try to keep some costs in line, I've given the analogy that it's sometimes you're the bug and sometimes you're the windshield. And that's how we're looking at it. So that's what this resolution will clarify there also. So it's pretty straightforward. If the board would want to adopt this tonight, you can. If you want to discuss it a little bit more, you can do that also. But until we adopt it, we're still operating the way we did before under the old procedures.
What's the board's pleasure?
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Calvin,
Yeah.
looking at section B, all police full-time officers shall be,
It's a typo, I think.
I think there's like, I got 2 copies of it. I'm trying to figure out which one I should be working off of. Yeah, there's 2 shall be compensated, so one of
Yes.
those needs to go away. But at the rate of 1.5 times for each hour over 84 in accordance with, should we say over 84 hours in a pay period or in a 2-week period, something like that?
Yeah,
Because-
we can do that,
I
yeah.
mean, we should be a little clear on that.
Yeah.
And then in section A, it says all non-exempt employees and the police sergeant shall be compensated. I'm trying to think a little more forward-looking here, and we said the police sergeant. Conceivably, we could get into a time where there's a lieutenant or there's 2 sergeants or whatever. I'm just wondering if we should say all police officers rank of sergeant or above, something like that, instead of just saying the police sergeant.
The one thing that as I was trying to blow through this to save some time, if you go back to the section 5-6, the language I proposed to add was for the purposes of overtime compensation, the town administrator, police chief, and office manager shall be considered management exempt from overtime compensation. So if you
So-
say sergeant and above, you're going to pick up the police
How about we
chief.
say sergeant and above excluding the police chief? Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Typically, it's written as lieutenant and below.
Okay.
So anything above the rank of lieutenant in law enforcement is considered an exempt rank.
Okay. So we can make that change.
Yeah.
Yep.
So are we going to move forward with it with corrections? What's the board's pleasure? Do you want to come back at the next meeting with the corrections?
Let's go ahead and move forward with it, Dave.
Yeah. sounds good.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. Moving forward into business meeting items, elected body protocol manual samples. Town administrator, do you have that?
Yeah, that is just it. At our executive session, we've been kicking this around for a while. It's basically a protocol manual that elected officials would be given that would sort of provide a roadmap for what they're supposed to be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. It's a recommendation that your insurance attorneys have recommended and your town attorney has recommended to create those guidelines. And so as we said to you, instead of us just sitting down and drafting something, we would bring you back some samples. So this is just a small sample of those. If you want to take a look at these and come back with your comments, then the town attorney and I can work on a final document.
Which one is that, Calvin? Is that the one that says La Plata?
They're all combined in a packet. There's multiple communities
Yeah.
in that.
Oh,
In there, you should have Aberdeen in there, Salisbury is in there, and I actually acquired a couple more before the meeting,
Okay.
so I'll get those to you.
Sounds great. So the board will review that and we'll get back with you
Yep.
at a later time. Okay. Last on business meeting items, which the town administrator will know that I am excited that we are moving forward with this finally, is a draft of chapters of a property maintenance code.
First of all, let me preface it by saying, normally, if you were adopting a property maintenance code, you would be having ordinance before you tonight. There is no ordinance before you tonight because I'm giving you chapter or draft copies that have been formulated over the last 3 or 4 years with different elected bodies, all kinds of different input. And so I'm giving you chapters out of this section so that we can quickly go over tonight to sort of highlight some of the hot button topics so the people watching this can see that we are trying to address some of their concerns. There are some new ideas that people may not be aware of, but let me preface it by saying is that if you wanted to, and I guess I want to be careful how I say this, this gives you all the tools you need to do everything you would think you would need to do in terms of property maintenance. And property maintenance is something that it's more than just Big Brother coming along and telling somebody they have to cut their grass or plow their snow or keep their property cleaned up. Because when you think of the domino effect of this, if anyone's going through the process of trying to sell their home, or if anybody's gone through the process of trying to get a home equity loan, maybe you have a daughter getting married and you want to get some money out of the equity in your home, the bank sends somebody around to do an appraisal of your property. And so property conditions around you or property conditions around you that resulted in somebody else selling their property for much lower than what they could have has a trickle-down impact on your lot and life. And I've always said that, people are the CEOs of their lives. And so just like big business can liquidate lots of money to expand their business, your poker chip is that house that you've invested a lot of money in. And so the neglect of other people around you can negatively impact that investment that you've made in your lives. So that's one of the main things that a property maintenance code does. The other thing a property maintenance code does is help to spark economic development. And you think about some of the, if you have a community that's run down, typically what happens is when a community starts to get over 33% of its residential properties being rental, that is the scientific tipping point of when communities are going to be on the verge of distress. And you can have trickle-down impacts of that with economic development where all you have in your community is a bunch of rentals, a bunch of pizza parlors, an overabundance of hair salons, an overabundance of things in there that are not really driving economic development, so to speak. So it's important that we do what we can to keep property values up so that we attract people who want to buy into the community. And if somebody wants to rent a property, they are motivated to invest in that property because of the property maintenance codes, but also because other community or other property owners are maintaining their properties too. So that's a diagram for another day's discussion in a workshop. But property maintenance codes are a major tool in a community's toolbox to move the community forward. So what you have here is a couple chapters here, and I'm just going to go through some of the pages to show you some of the things that are built into it. I'm looking at chapter 1, administration, and on page 2, you flip the page, there's a statement about what the core values, vision, and mission statement of the code department would be. The vision statement is underneath it. The mission statement is below that. That sort of lays the groundwork for what we're trying to do with code enforcement or property maintenance, what our commitment is to our residents and our constituents here. The other thing, it talks about who's going to be in the code department. This has language in here that allows us to use public works employees as part of code enforcement, police officers as part of code enforcement. If you go to page 5, this is something that I've learned in code enforcement, that a lot of times we get hung up on the language in the code because it doesn't give you a lot of flexibility to react to the reality of the situation that you deal with. So on the right-hand side of page 5, you'll see quarter of the way down the page, exceptions, repairs impacted by weather. And what we're building into this code is that if it is not a true blue life safety issue, it's nothing more than an aesthetics issue, sometimes weather can have a major impact on whether somebody can do that. Whereas other code departments might say, I'm sorry, you got to paint your building because you're in violation, and it's the middle of February. This code is going to give us the flexibility to work with people to bring their properties into compliance over a period of time. The other thing that we have done, and we've talked about this before in the past, is the way Cecil County is set up, any violations, typical violations of code enforcement have to be adjudicated, so to speak, by the state's attorney. In other words, what I'm familiar with, and again, coming from Pennsylvania, we were always able to go into the local court and present the case on the code violation, present that case to the judge, make the argument on why somebody's in violation, what the impact is, and the judge could say, I agree with your testimony, I'm going to find you guilty, you're going to be fined $50 for failure to do it. In Cecil County, the local code officers are not allowed to go into court. And the only way we can get before in that system is have the state's attorney do it. And you're thinking about state's attorneys handling, serious felonies and everything else. And now we're going to ask them to take the time to sit and make a case before a judge on why somebody hasn't cut their grass. And a lot of times that becomes swept under the rug, justifiably so, until you as the elected body have to go to your constituent who's just absolutely tired of the high grass and the rats and abandoned vehicles, and you're telling them, hey, I'm sorry, but we can't get it prosecuted. There's nothing we can do. So what we build into here is very similar to what the police department has. If somebody parks illegally in the town of Rising Sun, the officers can write up whatever it is, a $10, $15, $25 ticket. They bring that into the town hall, they pay that ticket, and that's their punishment for illegally parking. If they do not follow up with that, then the police department generates a citation that goes to district court. So it enables them to clean out a lot of this non-compliance with people who, they weren't thinking, they made an honest mistake, they're more than willing to take responsibility for it. They come in and pay their $25 ticket as opposed to making them take a day off from work and go sit in front of a judge for 2 or 3 hours waiting for their case to be heard. So we have a lot of violations in here that we plan on treating the same way, that we could just issue out a ticket right there and somebody could come in and pay that ticket or appeal it, and we could get it resolved without tying up the court system. The other thing in here is that it does set up an appeals board. In other words, sometimes people are not going to agree with why there's a property maintenance issue. If you recall, it was just a meeting or two ago that we had a resident express an opinion that blocking the sidewalk was not a code violation, when in fact it is. So you would get into a situation where we are citing them, they don't like it, they want to have a means to appeal that and have a discussion. So this code would set up an independent appeals board made up of residents and a member of this board, that they would be able to come and say, this is why I don't think that I should be held accountable for that. So there's a whole appeals process in here. On page 14, if you turn to that real quickly, Commissioner Arthurreath and the residents from Keppel's Mill would be interested in this. At the top left-hand side of the page, on page 14, we have a definition of a clear sight triangle. And what a clear sight triangle is that whether you're in a small compact car or a large SUV, if somebody has something on their property that's making it difficult for you to pull out safely in traffic, that's a clear sight triangle violation. So we're going to have language in here that would enable us to notify a property owner that, hey, you got to trim your bush back. It's getting really big and people can't see pulling out into traffic. It's commonly done in municipal government, but we don't have that language. So that's something that we're picking up here in this document. The other thing that's in here is very comprehensive language on high grass, how it's going to be handled. There's some language in here about sidewalks. There's language in here about when you drive down the road and you see properties that just really look bad, and as a resident you want to see something done about it, now the town has the resources to do this. One of the things I'm going to say from a staff standpoint, and the elected body would have the final say, but I think that they would agree, this is not something that we're going to hire somebody to walk up and down the streets and find every violation that we can find. That's not the intent. The intent is when Mrs. Himmer calls and has a concern about a clear sight triangle issue, we can do more than say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And we get a ton of complaints here in the town of Rising Sun from residents. If you remember at the last meeting, we sort of put Valley View in perspective. There's a lot of residents in Valley View that are unhappy with other residents in Valley View. The town doesn't have any way to mitigate that, so we sit here every 6 months having a discussion about what's wrong in Valley View or other developments, and all we do is shrug our shoulders and say there isn't really a whole lot we can do. So this kind of language here is a tool in the toolbox to enable you to do something when these issues are brought to your attention. In this, you're going to see your standard stuff about light and ventilation and what rental properties should have. And again, we're talking about rental properties where somebody comes to us and says, my landlord is creating an unsafe situation. I can tell you right now, we have an issue with an apartment complex where steps are actually missing on the steps going up to the second floor. We don't have any code language that even enables us to go in there and do anything about that. This document would give us the ability to go to that landlord and say the steps have to have steps on them. The other thing you have in here, we get a lot of complaints about abandoned vehicles. So I pulled this out of the document. You can look at chapter 10. This is something that the chief and I have worked on how to deal with abandoned vehicles. One of the things that I'm very proud that we've done here is, again, we try to deal with the reality. And sometimes people have abandoned vehicles for a justifiable reason. They lost their job, they can't afford the insurance to legally convey it on the road. Their son or daughter is in the military, they have a 2-year enlistment, they don't want to sell the car, but they don't want to have the car on the road. We're going to have provisions that allow you to do that. We're just going to ask that the car be kept in a manner so it doesn't look like an abandoned vehicle. We don't want tree branches laying on it. We don't want a cover on top of it that's all torn and tattered and blowing all over the place. So in other words, you can have technically a vehicle that can't be legally conveyed upon the road that stays in one location, as long as you don't make it look obvious and make it become an eyesore that generates your neighbors complaining. So that's something that we put a lot of thought into trying to accommodate those types of things. The other thing we have is a vacant property registration program, and this is something that's new that communities are moving towards, in that a lot of times banks will take a long time. I bet you there's people sitting in here now that know of an abandoned house or vacant house and generally where they live that's been vacant and looks run down for over a year, 2 years, 3 years in some cases. And that is the bank just coming in and weatherizing it and sitting on it, and it's pulling your property values down. This registration process will basically say that after a house has been sitting vacant for 6 months, unless there's an extenuating circumstance, that bank is going to have to register that property with the town of Rising Sun. We're going to charge them a registration fee for that sitting there, and in exchange, we're going to inspect that building on a regular basis. Because we all know we have neighborhoods now where the chief can tell you that they become drug houses. Kids break into them. There's all kinds of activity that goes on in those houses simply because the bank forgot about the vacant property. So we're going to put an extra effort into making sure those vacant properties don't become a problem for our constituents, and we're going to make the banks pay for that, or they would be held in violation of the code. And this is something that a lot of communities are moving towards. So this is a comprehensive document. It's there for you guys to look at, and we can schedule a future workshop in the future with the residents to answer any questions or discuss it in more detail.
Anyone have any questions? I think the most important thing is that I know I can probably speak for the elected body when I say that none of us want to become the type of elected body that's going to, not want to work with residents or business owners. We want to work with you. We want to make Rising Sun a beautiful place to live. We understand if you have a financial situation or something like that that you can't afford, but just come and talk with us. I think that this is a good start. And I'm looking forward to further discussions with this. Thank you. Last thing I wanted to do under business meeting items, forgive me, Town Administrator, for not putting this on there. With the resignation of Commissioner Walker, we have an opening for a Vice Mayor slot that fills in when I am unavailable or not here. Tonight, I would like to nominate Commissioner Alan Auchenreith for that position as Vice Mayor. Can I get a motion on the floor to approve that?
I so move.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. All right. Citizens' input. Ms. Maynard, you're first on the list. Mrs. Maynard, you're first on the list.
First of all, I would like to thank Alan for coming down through the village.
Where were you?
I'm working 12-hour days, so I'm at work at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I don't get out till 5:30 in the afternoon.
I'll come back so we can talk in person. Sorry we didn't catch you that day.
That's okay. That's fine. But like I said, I do appreciate you coming down. I did notice, and I don't know if I can do it, or do we need to go to the property owner, the stop sign, that when you come up from below, the tree is totally covering it. tree branches. You can't even see the stop sign. So does the landowner need to trim that back, or what can we do?
Well, if the tree is growing out of someone's yard, yes,
is.
they should trim that back. Of course, the town picks up that stuff for free every Monday. If they have a handicap issue, they can't get out and do it, let us know. We can always come help trim a tree.
Okay.
Now, I probably didn't see it because of that, but can you kind of draw me a mental picture? You say
When you're coming up from down below,
down at the very bottom of the hill?
at the
if you're
very
coming up?
bottom,
Yeah,
from where 35, the odd on the below side, when you come up, the property at, it's Pat Glenn's property.
is it on the right?
It's on the right-hand
Okay.
side, yeah. The tree branches are right in front of the stop sign, so you cannot see it.
Okay.
Because a lot of people do not stop
Because
there.
I didn't see one, and we walked from all the way around that
Yeah,
day.
there's a stop sign there, and then there's, there's a stop sign on my side, and then as you come in.
Okay,
But yeah.
I follow you now.
This kind of like was brought up to me, and I didn't realize it. The Boy Scout cabin. What's going to be done with that? Because right now, if the scouts, if they're going to start meeting at the school, they're going to start charging them like $200 a month to meet there.
Yeah, so the Boy Scout cabin right now, the biggest thing there is the cost of replacing it. I've been looking for grants to get that replaced. So far, I haven't come up with any yet, but if anybody comes up with one, I'm, more than happy to apply for it.
Well, maybe if somebody wins the Powerball, they'd
But,
be nice
yeah,
enough to
there we go.
donate. How's that?
We're looking at a couple different options there.
Okay. And the property maintenance code that you were talking about, Calvin, when
I'm
that
sorry,
all,
I didn't hear the first part.
when the property maintenance code that you guys were talking about, when that all gets down in black and white, can the landowners or property owners get a copy of that so we know what we can and cannot do?
We would make it available. It ends up being like a 130-page document, so we would have it on our website, and if anybody wanted to come in and get a copy, we would, like all of our codes, we would provide a copy on it.
Okay,
And
'cause you-
probably what we'll do is make a general, like we've done in building permits, make a general, the obvious ones, punch list.
Summary, like a summary
Yeah.
kind of, yeah.
okay, because I do have a question. You were talking about the property, all that, about snow removal. What if you do remove the snow and the town people come back in and put the snow back on the sidewalks?
That's,
Do I get to call and say, hey, can you guys come clean it back off again?
that's an issue that every community faces, and we try to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. Our guys do the best they can to try to not plow snow up on people's properties.
I'll tell you what I did last year.
Huh?
I went out and I'm like, hey, guys, can you just kind of move the plow this way instead of this way, instead of putting it on my sidewalk? And they were nice enough. They turned it, plowed it in the middle of the street and pushed it down. I'm like, yeah.
Right. My point is, look, anyone who, I don't think anybody's ever been turned down for the most part by any request that a resident has ever, I mean, we've done things.
Oh,
that-
I'm not saying you.
No,
guys-
I'm encouraging people, our people know to try to be as responsive as possible. I think all of us agree. I don't think any of us would really want to be a snowplow driver. It's like, I mean, you're called every name in the book when you're out there. Our guys, we preach to them and they take it upon themselves to be as responsible. But the best I could say is if anybody has an issue, just do what others do. Just give us a call and we'll do the best we can to, make it right.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, that one day, I'm going to, because see, the bad part is where I'm at, and I'm the only one in the whole development that has to shovel from the front of my house all the way up to Crothers Insurance. So I got that nice long sidewalk.
Right.
So it's like
Yeah.
I'm stuck. The other guy doesn't have it because he doesn't have it.
Right.
Matter of fact, he doesn't even clean it off for the school kids.
Well, one thing I would say that if we get a standard 4, 6, 8-inch snowfall, for the most part, our guys should be able to deal with that snow without too much impact on residents. Some of our smaller streets, you get a 3-inch snowstorm and there's nowhere to put it. Where we really get hammered is where we commit to plowing, and then a week later we get another big snowstorm, and the piles on the side are iced up. So again, I could sit here all day and give you all the different scenarios. The point I'm extending to you and all the residents is just work with us. Give us a call and we'll try to make anything right.
Another question. Where the kids have to stand in the morning for the school bus, there's no kind of cover or anything like that. So right now, they're standing at the stop sign. And there's really like no place to put like a cover, like even like a backstop with a cover on top. Across the street where the big electrical thing sits and all like that, and there's no parking there. Is there any way that something could be put there so the kids, if it's raining or snowing, they could at least go in underneath the cover, or does that have to be looked into?
To direct it to the elected body, I believe she's actually talking about land that is the property of the Board of Commissioners of the town of Rising Sun. Just over the years, residents have sort of moved in and taken care of that land. So, I think we could look into possibly we don't have to get permission from a property owner, I guess is what I'm saying. That's where it can get dicey if someone doesn't want to give us permission. But if I understand what she's asking, I think it's an area that is actually owned by the Board of Commissioners.
I saw the area, there's a couple of, two, I think,
Yeah.
open spaces where there's
Yeah.
no house.
I mean, I'm open to it, but my only concern would be that if we provided it for that neighborhood, then we would have to provide it for all the neighborhoods. That would be my one concern.
Yeah, I'm good.
With the exception of like in your neighborhood,
Got 40
you'd have
kids
to
now.
get the bank or somebody or whoever that is down on the end to sign off on putting the structure down there. In this particular case, we actually own the land. The other developments, I don't think we really have any land ownership that goes out to a street corner like
You need a
that.
pavilion too, because we got 40 kids at the elementary school bus stop this year.
Is that the only bus stop for the kids in there?
No,
Just that
they
one
stop at that stop sign, and then they stop at the end of the school bus driveway.
So they come down Valley View and then they make that left?
Yeah, they
And is
come
that-
down,
that
they
first
stop
right across?
right there at the first stop sign is where they stop and pick up the kids there. Then they go up the hill, right before they turn to the school bus driveway, they stop right there.
Next week I'll stop and we'll set up a time and that way you can show me these so I
Okay.
can really picture them. So right now I'm
Probably.
still seeing all the other things that jumped out last week.
Okay. Now, and I'm glad you come down and seen what some of our issues were.
Yeah, after, and I hate to jump ahead too far, but what I was going to say, I saw Mr. Barr down there that day and we talked and I saw a lot of things that I wasn't aware of, just like the trash can issue. Once I got down there and saw it, I saw the dilemma you're talking about. What do you do? Some residents, if they didn't have their trash cans out front, would have to drag them through their house to their backyard, their lawnmower, or anything else they want to take to their backyard. They have to drag it through their house. There's no other way to get back there. And when I saw this, and I have quite a long list that I made, that was last Wednesday, I think it was, we were up there. So I haven't had a chance to, because of the holiday and everything,
Right.
go over it with the other commissioners and
Well, see,
Calvin.
with-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
On our side, we have to have a 50-foot right-of-way. So that's why our fences
Yeah.
aren't going all the way back.
Yeah.
Because in our deed, we have to leave a 50-foot right-of-way for the fire trucks, which they won't fit in there now, but
Right. The Jeep might fit up through there if there was a fire. But I did see that, and the water issues you have back there and the drains and, a lot of the things. And I'll talk about that more when it's my turn. It's your turn right now.
thank you.
Ms. Emsley?
Good evening. We live in a very small town, and I didn't even know I was going to say this till I got to the meeting. When you're going to make an announcement at the beginning of the meeting during your prayer request, because some employee had his wife pass away, it would really be nice if you said who it is. Okay. But it just, if you're going to make the statement, it would be very nice if you actually said who it was so the people watching the video could see it. What I thought I was going to get up and say was many months ago I stood here and complained about the site, the website, not having meeting minutes on it, not having agendas on it. I was assured that when all the grant writing got finished and all the busyness got done, it would all be taken care of, and it isn't. Even today I logged on and there was no agenda for tonight's meeting. In the last month or two, there have been 2 meetings canceled. Wasn't on the website. So if you're going to have a website, and I think I said this before, it needs to be correct, or just take it down, because there's not much point in having one if the information there is wrong.
Thank you. Mr. Sammons?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. On the topic of maintaining a website, that can be a taunting task to keep it up to date all the time. It's a full-time job for somebody here. But I'm here to talk about the banner program that we have. I was looking to possibly expand that banner program from the Queen Street building over to the bank there. We had some preliminary emails going around about how about going to do that, and also some negative thoughts about how complicated it could be. I was basically wanting to reach out and possibly set up an appointment for you folks so we can get together and possibly speak about pros and cons and how we might be able to get around some of the red tape and get that going. Like, Kennett Square has it down there, and they have a big wide banner over their main street that promotes different businesses and different events that's going on continuously throughout the year. So it might be something that we try to get a permit for the year and rotate out banners as deemed necessary.
Vince, is the chamber meeting this month?
Yes, it's the third Wednesday this month.
And I mean, as we talked about, I think that we need to go through it's just a matter of making all the contacts. I mean, we're going to have to, talk to state roads. We have 2 building owners that we need to talk to and make sure they're okay with the program as such. They may want to have some say in what banners get hung up.
Sure.
They may not want competitors' banners hanging from their building.
That too, possibly, yeah.
So-
okay, fair enough.
So I mean, there's probably things like that we need to deal with. I would have concerns if we had, like things going up that were derogatory in nature or something like that, right? So
Yeah, I don't think that would happen, but
Yeah.
whatever the language is you want to put in there for in approval process, I think would be
right, and
warranted is fine.
right, and so we'd have to make sure that what we have, I mean, because we're a government entity, that we're not running into any First Amendment
Again,
type
it might be
issues.
something we discuss
So-
and hammer out the details
Yeah.
and expand that a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean,
it's a good idea to sit down with Mr. Sammons and
Yep.
talk more about it.
so I think there's just some challenges we got to work out with
I'm
it.
sure, yeah.
And then once we figure that out, I think then we can, hopefully move forward looking into that.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Thanks.
Vince, that's why this morning when we were emailing, I told Dave, since, he's been working with you guys so much, he'd be a good contact for us to work with you and work out all those details of, who owns the buildings and all that stuff and get that thing rolling, because I think it'd be really good for us to see that banner going across.
I know some more complicated requests than just putting them up on the poles, I realize that, but, I'm sure we'd be able to find some way to work it out,
was
where we can
a
do
lot
it.
easier for the other banners because
Sure,
the person's dad owned one of the buildings, so there was
Too,
not as
right.
many legal situations as they would with this, so,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't see why.
Community-oriented stuff, they had no issue with. I mean, I think if you get into commercial banners, they might start to have a little more objections. That's what we need to work out at this point.
And it's local businesses too.
Right, and because we even when we hang the current banners, we always ask every time, even though
Sure.
we're pretty sure they're going to say yes. I think we ask pretty much every time.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to speak this evening? All right. We will move forward into town financials. Ms. Wagner.
Travis, I did get the paper today to pay you all, so. If you all want to turn to the compilation, you don't have I didn't think Mandy had sent them to you yet. Mandy went on vacation and I didn't get to review until after she was on vacation.
Go real slow, I can write it.
Okay. I wanted to explain to you all that there are some changes coming down for accountants. Like you have rules, we have rules, and there's driving rules and everything. Well, the
the powers to be changed all the accounting rules. So when it comes to a compilation, which is what you have, ZARS 21, which has to be activated by December 15th of this year, means that the compilation letter will change and parts of the report will change. If we had notes, they would need to change. So there's a lot of changes that are happening. I have already started to work on the letter, and most likely the next set of financial statements, you are going to see ZARS 21 in place in your financial statements. I personally believe in adopting everything early. Our office just had our peer review, which we passed with flying colors. So that's just part of the way I am. I believe it should happen early. So the whole letter is going to change a good bit when you see it next time. And I kind of wanted to forewarn you. The balance sheet is total assets are $392,152.29. $125,000 of that is cash and cash equivalents. You have $28,000 in the MLGIP, and you still have the restricted cash, which we've been trying to work with Howard Bank to get the restriction released and get the money put into our bank accounts. You will see the accounts payable and accrued expenses are higher than you are used to seeing. That's because we don't book them during the year, but we do book them. This is with all the expenses that were June's expenses that we paid in July, because bills kind of come to you late. And then there's due to the proprietary fund, we needed $337,477.53 for a unrestricted fund balance of $21,646.97. If you go to page 4, you will see that the revenue is $1,451,608.58. You will see that the expenditures were $1,602,216.19. We had a negative change in fund balance. So if it was like a for-profit business, that means we ran in the negative, and this is just in the government. This is not proprietary. We ran in the negative $150,607.61. So before that, we had a reserve of $172,000. We ate into that reserve by $150,000, which brings the reserve down to $21,646.97. If you go to the last page of budget to actual, which is page 8, you will see that we received $62,798.62 less revenue than we budgeted for. But the majority of that you will see really happen in the real estate taxes. Our property values went down. There was adjustments and changes. And so what they projected that we were going to collect, $825,000 worth of real estate taxes, was only $765,000 for a negative amount of $59,000. We did keep expenditures under by budget by $96,166.22. So that negative impact there, you're only talking about $30,000. And what really brought it up higher was the fact that we did not take out the full loan for the streets and sidewalks, which would have brought us another $65,000 worth of revenue, because we took money from the proprietary fund. Because when you look at it, the proprietary fund is in the black, if you want to say that. So we'll go to the proprietary fund because it's in a lot better shape. The total assets are $20,278,346.09. There was cash in the bank of $321,762.73 total for water and sewer. There is in the MLGIP, which is like your investments, of $903,733.53. We will have a receivable of $142,000 of different charges, and there is a receivable on the sewers books The water owes the sewer $127,931.81. You have accounts payable of $12,084, and then you will go down here and see the other half, what is the liability for the water of $127,000. You will also see due to bay restoration, which what will happen is in 20 days after June 30th, we will pay out bay restoration, and that's $22,372.81. Then that will balance. We go to the next page, page 4. Your total revenue, operating revenue for water and sewer is $1,243,317. Your total operating expenses is $945,984.62. And like I said here, your positiveness of where you're running in the black is $297,332.47. So if you really took those two, you would be ending the year in the positive by about $70,000 if you took the government and the sewer. You are going to sit there and say, wow, $1,940,251. This is from the MDE part of the loan coming back to us. And we got grant money from MDE. But that money is going to go into reserves, and that will help to pay for the interest and what's going on with the sewer plant. And that's part of the reason of why we're seeing so much money in the sewer bank account, and why we will take some of that money and use it in the water account. Any questions so far? I know I kind of went through that fast. On page 8, you will see that we are positive over the budget by $18,014.98. And we are good of expenditures, meaning we spent $209,894.37 less than what we were budgeting. Now, some of that has to do with the fact that some of the things that we budgeted are actually a fixed asset, and we've had to capitalize them. An area that you'll see that heavily in is the contract services will end up that way. So we'll go down, we're in the positive by $227,909.35. If you add the MDE grant money that we got, we're actually positive change in net assets of $2,166,712.24. So we've definitely increased our reserves in the water and the sewer by over $2 million. Any questions with that? Okay. Yes.
On that page at the top,
Mm-hmm.
why is it 2012, 2013?
That is a glitch in the system, and we are in the process of changing the software, and that will be going away.
So that should have been 2013, 2014, or
2014,
2014,
2015. It is something we have changed, and it keeps coming back. And it's a glitch that's going to, we're also put you on to the new software starting July 1st. And it's a lot easier software to create financial statements and everything. I'm in the process of creating those, so once we get them up and running and tested, then we will probably present the next financial statements on the new software. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner.
Thank you.
Chief?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. For the period of August 28th through September 8th, we responded to 214 calls for service. Most notable in that 2-week period, 8 drug arrests, 4 fugitives from other jurisdictions that were arrested here in town, and 1 local person here that had a failed to appear warrant. Excuse me. Also during this period, the officers in the police department has began to undergo training on the new county-wide report management system. and it sounds basically like what I said. It's a report management system that all the law enforcement agencies in the county will be using. That way we can share information. If you're arrested in Northeast or Elkton, we'll have that knowledge, that information in a database that we can access easily to get the information. That's an ongoing training that the guys will have. It also comes with a new radio dispatch system, which allows for the police cars in the county to be monitored via GPS. So if there's a call for service that comes about and we need to get the nearest unit to the scene, it will be done. The mobile data terminals will be going in the cars very soon. That allows the GPS tracking to function. Last week, I attended the Rising Sun Middle School. They had a tabletop exercise on a active shooter. It was a test of the administration and staff to see what their response would be if an event like that had occurred in the school. I'm pleased to announce that they did very well. They now understand how the law enforcement end will respond if something like that occurs, and we have a better understanding of what they will go through and how they would act. I was just recently made aware that the State Aid for Police Protection grant has been released. It has to be in by October, so that grant will be completed shortly. The financials are the first portion that need to be submitted, and they've been given to Wagner and Associates, so we can tabulate that information and get it to the state. The police department received 2 preliminary breath tests, brand new, from the health department via grant. That will allow the officers to get a baseline or some sort of gauge on how much alcohol a person has consumed prior to a breath test. It's actually great that the grant was written by the health department and they were able to provide us with those instruments free of charge. I recently became aware of the some issues that we're facing in Valley View. If you haven't noticed, there is a foot patrol presence there. The officers are now required to walk foot patrol in that area during their shift. So you're going to start to see, if you haven't seen it yet, you will be seeing that. Sergeant Circus was one of the first. He was down in Valley View on foot. You may not recognize him because he was not in a uniform, but he's been down there doing some observing and reporting back to me. And lastly, the Rising Sun Police Department and the DEA are coming together to put a meth lab awareness training together. It's scheduled for Thursday the 17th. This training is actually for like public work employees, code enforcement officers, as an awareness training to give them a sense of what to look for when you're dealing with meth labs. They've kind of evolved from what they used to be with the beakers and all to now having just simple household bottles and chemicals. So if anyone here from the board or the town employees would like to attend, it's Thursday the 17th at 11 a.m. And if you need any more information, you can see me. I will get that set up for you. And with that being said, that's my report, if there's no questions.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Town Administrator, do you have a report this evening?
Yes, Mayor, we have a lot of things I've got to bring you guys up to speed on, above and beyond what we did already. The first thing, in your packet, you have a document that has letter D insubordination, and on the top right-hand side, it has 5-11-2 or 5-II-2. The reason why I'm bringing this to your attention, this is something that the chief and I have been working on at the direction of the town attorney. If you remember some of the stuff that we've just recently gone through, in addition to making some changes in our personnel manual, the regular employees personnel manual, it's being recommended that we change some language in the police personnel manual in terms of how they conduct their business, in terms of who they're discussing police business with, to give them the direction on how they are supposed to respond as police officers. And essentially what this does is make sure that communication and chain of command is followed and not deviated from, which results in legal challenges and legal issues for the town going down the road. So this is what you have here is language here that sort of clarifies under item 1, employees of the department shall, unless otherwise directed by competent authority, transact all official police department business with the employee senior in rank or classification in accordance to the official chain of command as spelled out within this manual. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but this basically is just giving the direction of the police officer that in the absence of the police chief being around when it comes to police business, what are they supposed to do? How do they come and make a decision? It could be a senior, they can respond to an accident and have a senior guy there that they can run ideas or permission to do certain things. The chief is clarifying that in his manual. And then the other item here is an employee of the department will transact all official town business with the town elected officials through the official chain of command with the exceptions found in Chapter 5, Section 7 and Chapter 5, Section 9. Those sections of Chapter 5 have to do with discrimination and, grievance and sexual harassment here. And the one change that the chief and I we need to get some direction from the town attorney on, what we're trying to eliminate is people going outside the chain of command, and in this particular case, going to elected officials about certain things, and it gets way out of context, way out of hand, and then we have problems like we've just gone through, quite frankly, over the last couple of months. So we need to clarify that. The chief and I are going to sit down and look at this. In reality, it should probably say that official town business would be conducted with the town administrator if it is talking about things that are away from his world of police activities. If someone has a problem with another employee, if they have an employee issue, we really don't want them going to elected officials to get that resolved. That's been a continual problem. So this is something that you folks directed us to work on. I would ask that if you like the concept, you don't have to agree with the language. If one of you guys could make a motion directing the chief to continue to work with the town attorney to get this straightened out in his personnel manual for the satisfaction of our attorneys.
What's the board's pleasure?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Town Administrator.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to do is give you an update on the sewer plant. We had a coordination meeting there today. For all intents and purposes, we're really down to tightening the final bolts and the final screws and sprucing everything up. The plant has been operating for now about a month, maybe a little over a month. The effluent quality is very good. One of the things I took a video of today, and I meant to show it tonight, but time got away from us, is how quiet the plant actually is. The other thing I want to say for the residents who are watching, if you are in and around your home and you smell that all too familiar choking smell that comes around the town of Rising Sun, it is not the town of Rising Sun's wastewater treatment plant. It is the mushroom farm. And if you go down there to the plant, the type of treatment that is being used, number one, the plant does not generate much methane, which is what creates the odor. And this process does a very good job of dealing with the methane. So I know some of you folks were down there when this plant was operating. It has no negative odor to it. But the thing I was amazed by is when I went up on behind the plant from where we were the other day to the adjoining property line, all you hear is the crickets and the birds in the trees. You literally do not hear this plant. And I was standing no more than maybe 25, 50 feet away from some of the structures. The way the structures are built, any noise that is generated is projected straight up into the sky. So when you go up on some of the buildings, you can hear the machinery running, but when you go down the ladders or down the steps, you don't hear it. You hear more traffic from the Route 1 corridor. So that's good news given the fact that we potentially have development, at some point in time coming into the Wellington Manor site. There's a lot of trees that still need to be planted down there to provide a good buffer between the sewer plant and the Wellington Manor site off of Route 1 or off of Red Pump Road. The lagoon, this has been something that our employees have been concerned about. Obviously, MDE would not allow us to have two discharge points into the creek. And that's one of the things that when this new plant was being designed, we could not just package up the discharge and send it out to the same location that the lagoon was going to. So we had to create another discharge point. And obviously, MDE is not going to allow us to discharge from two different points. But MDE also understands that there's volume in the lagoon that has to go somewhere. It's still being treated. And then there's a transitional period of when our plant is operating that we're going to have discharge in two locations. So I know there was a little pulling of the fire alarm a couple weeks ago with some of our employees thinking, oh, we're going to get in trouble. MDE is well aware of that. We've been in communication with MDE. As of today, we only had 2,000 gallons of water leave the sewer plant in the last 24 hours, leave the lagoon. So the lagoon, through evaporation and natural drainage, is on the verge of no longer discharging. We're not going to pull the plug and block everything off until we have at least, a good number of days of this current plant operating before we commit to doing that. Again, MDE is aware of that, and there's no issues with that. USDA settlements. We will be going to settlement on the last tranche of the USDA loan. If the board remembers, we had a discussion back in July about de-obligating some funds. And we were originally talking about de-obligating all but $1 million of money to keep the $1 million to be able to use towards other miscellaneous things at the sewer plant that could, maybe it's a storage shed, maybe it's a walk-behind lawnmower, maybe it's a couple of things that we weren't able to get in the original design or had to scrap. So we have that $1 million set aside for that. However, when all the numbers are crunched, we come within about $63,000 of the full allotment of money that was given to us. So quite frankly, to make the paperwork a lot easier, I just told them to not de-obligate any money, that we'll use that additional $63,000 for other things that come up. And for the residents' purposes, even if we don't use all that money and we decide a year from now, you know what, we've got $1 million sitting in reserve, we're not going to use that money, even if we pay that back, it does not give us any appreciable cash flow relief over the next 40 years. All it does is pay off principal on the back end of the 40-year loan. So, maybe the loan gets paid off in 38 years or 36 years instead of 40 years. And so given the fact that there's no cash flow incentive for us to turn the money, de-obligate all the money, that's why we originally thought we were going to keep $1 million in reserve. but now it turns out we're going to need really all of the $5 million with the exception of 63,000. So we're going to do what USDA calls a dry settlement on Thursday, which they make sure that the mechanics of notifying everybody goes the way it's supposed to go, and then we'll go to an actual live settlement on Friday. The two great things that USDA has done. First of all, in order to allow us to let the dust settle, so to speak, financially, we are going to be paying our principal and interest. In the first 2 years, we're going to pay interest only, and we're going to pay it once a year. We'll have a one-time payment, as opposed to having a monthly payment or a semi-annual payment that could be a high number. This gives us a little bit of time to grow into what that number is going to be. The other thing is the USDA interest rate actually dropped since our last discussion. So over the life of the 40-year loan and 13 some odd $million, every little percentage drop actually helps the town in the long run. So that's good news to report on. The other thing is Brian's Grace, and this is where, we're going to be a little bit candid here about some of the stuff that's going on, because we're reaching a point where residents want to know certain things. And so Brian's Grace is something that's been hanging out there for a long time. We've had some residents come here frustrated on the dedication of Brian's Grace. And essentially what it is the developer for Brian's Grace has essentially just walked away from the responsibilities that he has on the project. We took out he was required to provide a letter of credit, and that letter of credit was secured through Cecil Bank, a local community-oriented bank. As you're well aware, a couple months ago, Cecil Bank and these are my words, I'm not going to put this on the elected body, they got a bunch of their people, got in a car, drove over to Brian's Grace, and couldn't figure out why there was still a letter of credit on it. So basically a bunch of people in suits went over there and decided that the town of Rising Sun no longer needed that $497 some odd $1,000 letter of credit. So as I told some of the board members today, we have taken the next step with legal, and we have notified Cecil Bank that we're not going to accept that position, and we want to try to negotiate this out to try to come to a resolution. Remember the number 100,000. We, in due diligence, worked with Cecil Bank and said we don't need the full $490 some odd $1,000. We paid our engineer to go out and do the fourth punch list in the past 5-6 years to say what are the numbers, and we came up with a need of about $100,000 to finish that project out. So we're only asking for 25% essentially of what the letter of credit is. So that's money that if we don't get that from the letter of credit, potentially the taxpayers of the community are going to have to pay that money to make those corrections in that development. So I want you to remember that portion there. Ryan Drive, Commissioner Auchenreith, I did meet with KCI today. Again, an issue so residents understand. The town of Rising Sun put in for roughly a $500,000 grant application with USDA, and that grant was put in place to rebuild the Ryan Drive roadway. As we have done the work up there back in February, quite frankly, we found that the roadway was not built to recognized engineering standards. We also have documentation in our files back in the 90s that the town was at that time notified by the engineer that inspections were not called upon properly and there were concerns, and for whatever reason back in the early 90s, the developer's hand was not held to the fire. So although the road lasted for an appreciable amount of time, once we had that type of water line break up there like we did, there's no ballast up there or heavy material to be able to withstand all that water. It's basically a sand gravel. And so the reason why you have all those depressions and ruts up there is that water went through that underground system that was not built properly and eroded that out, and that's why the residents have all those sinkholes up there. So our grant was intended to rebuild all of Ryan Drive, which would basically mean we were going to take the top blacktop off. There is no second blacktop layer. Anyone who knows road construction knows you typically put 2 inches of blacktop on top of 3 or 4 inches of base coat. There's no base coat. They just put 2 inches, an inch, in some cases an inch of blacktop right on the dirt up there. And so we are looking to take about 12 to 14 inches of the road completely out of there, rebuild it with ballast and compact it the proper way, put your 3 or 4 inches of base coat on top of it, 6 inches in some cases, and then put 1 to 2 inches of top coat over top of it. So that's what the $500,000 roughly was to rebuild it. Unfortunately, USDA is not going to give us a grant for it, and this is the rub, and I don't mean any disrespect to USDA, but they base their grants upon how much a community is paying in sewer and water rates. And obviously our sewer and water rates are high in this community. People are choking on it and struggling all the time, and the costs are what the costs are. But in the grand scheme of things, of those analysis that they do looking at other communities, we don't qualify for grant money because, quite frankly, our rates are not high enough to justify that grant money. So as frustrating as that is, I want to be candid and let the residents know it's not a lack of trying by the elected body to get this done. It's the rules and regulations that we have to work with. So we can't afford to take on any more debt service for $500,000 of money. We just can't afford that debt service. That would require the sewer and water rates the water rates to be raised, and that's the goal, is to try to avoid that. So what we can do for about $200,000 to $300,000 is just repair the upper part of Ryan Drive from Sunrise Circle, that cross street, to the cul-de-sac. And without having gone to bid, that estimate is about $200,000 to $300,000. So I want you to remember, on top of the $100,000 on Brian's Grace, $200,000 to $300,000 number there. So in order to do that, KCI said that they can have the bids ready to go within about 3 weeks, ready to go out the door. They have contacted the blacktop plants, and they've said that if you remember last year, State Highway was blacktop and Route 1, and I believe it might have been December, January thereafter. And it's just a byproduct of notifying the blacktop plant that you're going to have that need. They will make the special accommodations. It's Joe contractor can't come off the street in December and get blacktop. They will do it specifically. So we think we're out of the window of running out of time to do it. He also estimates that the total project would take about 4 weeks to do. And again, that's just from Sunrise to the cul-de-sac, to take up the bad material, put new material in, and we're not going to replace the water line, because if we replace the water line, the regulatory regulations would require us to get a permit from MDE, and that's an automatic 90-day suspension. You don't do anything until you get a permit from MDE. So we're not going to replace the water line. However, we are proposing to replace the remaining service connections up there, and then hopefully that will hold us over. The problem is, if we ever have a problem with the main line in the street, we are now going to be digging up the $200,000 to $300,000 that our taxpayers paid to fix the upper portion of it. The other thing I mentioned, the problem with Ryan Drive is inspections were not adhered to back in the day. There were engineering requirements that were waived, and the cost is $200,000 to $300,000 to fix. The one thing, and I guess I'll piggyback on what the mayor said because there was a question, one of the reasons why we're not disclosing the name of the public works employee is that he has basically asked to keep it private. He hasn't really even notified anybody of the situation. It's just the family's preference to keep it private, so that's why we're not saying the name here. But with that said, I just want to let the residents know our public works employees, that consist of 4, I would ask, to echo on the mayor that we say a prayer for a couple of guys in our public works department because their personal lives right now are really taking some devastating bad news with, one lost a child, we all know, a couple months ago. Now there's a spouse that's not doing too well, and we just lost a spouse. So our public works department over the next couple of weeks is going to be, really pressed to try to stay up on some of our projects. And I had a talk with the director today. Let's start lining up contractors to do snow plowing, salting of the roads, any kind of work that comes up, because I don't want these employees, with the stress they have, having to stress out over a water main break or a sewer main break at that particular moment. So we're asking them to put together a plan B that we can act upon. We might contemplate the idea of picking up a part-time employee. We've always had that in our budget in the past to be another set of hands to help, but it's a little bit too premature to go with that. The last thing that I wanted to leave you with, and you heard the accountant's report, were basically, and I wrote these numbers down after the fact, but we basically had $169,000 of reserve funds in the general fund. And let's remember, the general fund is populated financially by real estate taxes. It doesn't get its money by sewer and water, it gets it by real estate taxes. And those real estate taxes are the ones who pay for road repairs and the stuff that we have to do. So you heard the accountant talk about our real estate tax collection was like $769,000. Just over the past year, we're going to be paying $200,000 to $300,000 to repair Ryan Drive because of bad development and just procedures that were not followed back in the 90s. That's taxpayers' money that's going to go into that. We already had to take care of Maple Heights Drive because of bad development and the developer's hand not being held to the fire. The taxpayers paid to get that stretch of road fixed because that was a battlefield in there. We're looking at $200,000 to $300,000 to fix Ryan Drive here. We've already paid $50,000 just for those water breaks that we had back in February up in the Ryan Drive area. And we've already got $50,000 plus tied into the stormwater pipe at Keppel's Mill Road, which again was bad development and lack of oversight in those areas. And the other thing we have, and I'm going to throw it out there, is, from 2013 to 2014, the town incurs over $200,000 of totally ridiculous legal fees. So my point is, we're talking about our reserve fund and real estate taxes going from $159,000 down to $21,000. We've got, $800,000 of money that I bet every single one of us would wish that we could have that back. That we wish that the town would have held developers' feet to the fire back in the 90s. That we wish that these developers would have done it right. That we wish the bank would give us the letter of credit that we're entitled to. That we didn't have legal fees for just insane purposes. So when as a resident are watching TV and they're thinking about what they're getting for their money's worth, we, as the accountant said, we're cutting expenditures, we've reduced staffing, we are applying for grant monies, we're finding all kinds of creative ways to save money, but the one thing we can't stop the bleeding on is stuff that happened back in the 90s that you as an elected body are holding the baggage now, and residents that live here are holding the baggage now too. So I just think it's real important to throw that out there for everybody to understand. The glass is half full, it's not half empty, but we've got to be really mindful of how we are dealing with this stuff. And that's why the town is not bluffing, quite frankly. That's why we're telling the bank we want our money. That's why we're telling the developers we want our money. We're not going to take it rolling over. So that concludes my report.
Historical Preservation Commission, do you have a report this evening? No report? Any old business? Any new business? All right, my report is going to be very brief this evening.
Want me to do it for you?
I recently visited Rising Sun High School. I love going to the high school and the middle school and the elementary school, letting the kids know I'm there. I love doing walkthroughs and seeing what they're doing in the classroom. When I was there, they were actually dissecting, I believe it was baby pigs at that time. It was pretty interesting, actually, because they've come a long way with technology, and they have cameras that actually go inside the pig now and check out everything inside. I will also be sending an invitation to all of the board members to again this year attend the Rising Sun High School football game for homecoming. They have asked me to present the Spirit Stick again this year. I wanted to remind everyone that October the 24th will be our Fall Spooktacular. This is our third year doing this event, and I am really excited for all the fun, free activities that we're going to have for kids to do this year. I also wanted to let everyone know that when you drive through the main street this evening, you may notice that all the lights are green. September is Donate Life Month. It was named Donate Life Month last year in honor of Benjamin Larson. Ben was only 17 when he was tragically killed. Motorist pulled out in front of his motorcycle and killed him. He was a hero because his organs went to and saved 6 people's lives. So I want to encourage people. I've asked all the board members to wear these green bands to encourage people to be a donor, because you can help save people's lives. Moving forward into commissioners' comments, Commissioner Altenreith.
Well, I recently visited Valley View. Bill, saw you there. We had a good conversation. Walked the neighborhood over with Jane and took a lot of notes just, from my short time there. And I'm really not prepared to sit here tonight and say we're going to fix all these things. One thing I did see that I think we shouldn't have a real problem being able to do is restriping your parking area, so that, I seen there was a couple that have been done. I gave this list to the commissioners and Calvin today, and we have a couple of meetings set up this week to go over that list, and he knows the history. But when we start talking about the history, that's part of what we are sitting here facing today. The history of all these developments, and if you've been here a long time, you know what the history has in common in all these developments. And it's just like you said, poor land development, somebody lining their pockets with cash, not worrying about what it would be like 20, 30 years down the road. And all the money we spent in legal fees to the gentleman there, that's money we could have had to work on this community. So Brenda, I'm going to come back down. I have my card here for you so we can email each other and get a date where you're available. I did see your place was the first one I looked at and then went down and back up. So I have a list of 20 items. The only one right now, like I said, I think we can commit to before the weather gets bad is restriping. I contacted a company today that strictly does parking lot striping to have them come in and look at it, give us an estimate of what it would cost. And not to make any excuses, but everything comes down to a cost. And when you've only got $29,000 in your bank account, it's hard. And Calvin's gotten very good at the grant writing and grant applications, which are very tedious, to see if we can't, get a lot of this grant money that's out there. And we don't let the fact that maybe our water rates were too high, we didn't qualify, just keep going after them. Commissioner Warnick, can vouch for how much money we've gotten for the Parks and Recreation Department to do things that we couldn't have done before. Some of that's money you got to spend first and get reimbursement for, so they make sure that the money isn't spent someplace where it shouldn't be. So I'm not going to forget about you as long as I'm sitting here at this board, as well as Brian's Grace. We've stayed after them very aggressively this summer. Commissioner Scully was involved with us a few months back when we met with the board, and we're not letting the pressure up on them. We're not going to take their little offer and go away. That's not happening around here anymore. Our Planning and Zoning Board is going to be holding upcoming developments to a higher standard. If you want to come in here and use our resources to build a development, be prepared to 30 years from now say, yes, I did build that, and I'm proud of it, unlike what we've got here in the past, where we're fighting with a developer to get some money to finish up something because he got what he wanted, she wanted, they wanted, and they walked away from it. And they're, trying to move on to other things and left so many things hanging. Maple Heights was left hanging. Brian's Grace was left hanging. Valley View was left hanging. Why things that have been wrong down there for so many years were overlooked by one of our mayors, I think, was a resident of that community. And why did she not do anything about it? Why did the past town administrators and board not do anything about it? Why wasn't something done when they built those places and now there's no access to the back of your house without going into somebody else's yards, jumping some fences, or dragging stuff through your house? I don't understand. I know why it happened. I don't understand why somebody would let it happen and not have a problem with still being in business in this town and having that, following them around. I don't understand why they would do that. But unlike other areas in this county that have a niche, Port Deposit has the river, Northeast has waterfront, Elkton is our county seat. We are a residential community. People come here because they want to get away from the hustle and bustle. I work in Baltimore City and cover the state. But when I want to get away from all that, Rising Sun's an excellent place to get to that. And that's what future residents are going to be looking for. They want a quiet place to come home where they don't have the street issues, the lack of open space, nobody planning for where the children that will come from these families moving in will play. Why these developers never thought about the future of these families and where their children would play and are okay with them playing out in the street while people are speeding by and the chief's men are out there writing tickets till they run out of ink, and it still happens. And there's just so many things that are being overlooked. But that's the beauty of Excel spreadsheets, because what gets emailed to me a year ago, I still haven't forgot about. And, after, you guys coming up, talking last week, and I'm not afraid to come down and face you guys Yeah. Bill and I, we had a good talk, the other day, and the other gentleman, I think his name was Scott. Yeah, I gave him the crooked hand. I gave him a crooked handshake, made him one of us. Got Jane to take his picture. Look, Jane, I got him. So, we're,
The one issue you just touched on, kids playing in the street. Kids don't belong playing in the street.
That's
I don't
right.
care if you're doing 15 mile an hour or 10 mile an hour. Kids don't belong in the street.
yeah. When a
Being
developer,
brought
I'm sorry.
up on Cherry Street, and that's not even an issue there. That's the parents' fault. That's not the people that's driving on the street.
Yeah.
That's some of the issue down there. Some of
Yeah.
it is the parents' fault because they let their kids, and especially when the kids are off in the summertime. There's one little girl, she's 6, 7 years old. They open the door, let her out, lock it, and gone. She's outside all day.
Well, I'm glad that, you said that, because it does. A lot of times that it does fall on the responsibility of the parents to watch after their children and not have them playing in the street, and teach them that when there's something, when there's cars coming, that means don't run to the street. Stay away from it. Why so many developments in this town were built and open space was called open space, but it was actually a stormwater management pond or a treed area or nothing. No playgrounds, no place for these kids to play. I don't understand how, in good conscience, they did this.
Down our way, 2 of the houses was not supposed to even be built.
I understand
There
that.
was supposed to be a playground
Yeah.
there.
And we've heard so much bad talk about George Beers and Delaware Development Company and the Maple Heights townhouses back there, but they got some nice playgrounds. They got nice equipment back there. Somebody, that was, as much as, we have our issues with that company, but they did, when I got to looking around, I was like, well, at least they planned for having families with children who needed a place to play. Now, of course, they love riding their bicycles around that area, and the traffic in there is not too bad. But this year, when school started, we're like, where the heck did all these kids come from? I've watched Commissioner Warnick's children grow up the past 10 years, but he didn't grow more. They just grew up. But we're like, where did they all come from? You know, the school bus stop has just exploded, and we're like, and they're out there running around and chasing each other, and the energy they have in the morning without coffee is amazing, and they expend that energy at the bus stops. So, but not in a destructive way, just kids playing way. And now we're sitting here as the Board of Mayor and Commissioners trying to figure, how do we do something about this? And it's aggressively going back after these developers who have, you know, I call it the Robert Ursay effect. When Robert Ursay sold the Colts and moved out of town, he sat around with a drink in one hand and his money in the other hand, laughing all the way. And I kind of see that happening. You know, they got their money and they're trying to avoid it, but we're not going to let that happen. And also, we're not going to let new development coming in, now that we've got the sewer plant up and running and working on an alternate, source of water, we're not going to allow them to come in and do that anymore. I don't know how much we can fix of what they did in the past. And I hope residents, with the upcoming election, will come and get involved. This is not a partisan committee up here of Republicans and Democrats. We're Rising Sun residents. First and foremost, Commissioner Scully and Warnick and I, we're residents, tax-paying residents first, and commissioners second. And whether you're involved in the PTA, coaching little leagues and stuff like that, it's all giving back to your community, and that's what we're trying to do here. And we're a little fed up with what we've seen, the past let happen, and now we're sitting here trying to figure it out. So we'll be back down, and we see all the other communities, and as the town administrator has just rattled off, we're not forgot about any of them, and we haven't forgotten. We know who the characters are, and they're avoiding us, and they're not in here pounding the thing saying, what have you done for me lately? It's the residents up here now wanting to know what we're going to do. And the developers, we've got our thumb on them, and we're not going to let up. We may not be able to squeeze the blood out of the turnip, but we're going to get some reparation for this. So I'll be back down. Like I said, Brendan, get my card for the meeting so I can meet with you, and Bill will be looking for you again, and we can talk some more.
I'm not leaving.
I know where you live, and
I'm like, you don't have it, I don't go away.
so that.
I will say, commend Chief, we have eliminated the situation with two boys that like to play chicken with cars down there. That has ceased.
Oh, well, Miss Lynn called me the other night, I had a boy laying underneath my car.
Yeah.
He didn't get hit, did he?
Yeah, now
He
they're.
didn't take one of them out.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to eliminate that problem.
I've rattled on here. Like I said, I've got a list, and I'm sure it'll be expanded. Before I forget, next P&Z meeting is the 21st of this month, here on third floor, 6:30 p.m. And I think that's it for me.
Commissioner Scully.
I attended the Mayor's Drug Task Force in the mayor's place. He had a conflict, and a lot of things were discussed in that meeting. It was the second time I had the opportunity to attend. Meaningful highlights. What were the things that you take away? The state's attorney gave a presentation on what the county task force is doing, mainly focused on people that are trafficking drugs. A lot of what police interaction with is with users, and you can toughen sentences on users, but we really need to stop how the drugs are coming into our communities. So giving the mayor's updates on that, and certainly our police force, as you can see by the presentation that the chief did, that they're constantly finding drugs in our community. So we're doing a good job with it, but it's always going to be probably 10 steps ahead of us. The other meaningful takeaway was religious organizations and leveraging the religious organizations in our communities to provide the education to children and the support for families that have children that are dealing with some type of addiction. We had, the reason it was an eye-opener for me is because last February is National Drug Facts Week, and we were going to try and do this through the schools. and weren't successful in being able to do that. So looking forward to being able to tap into the religious organizations who were very receptive to starting to talk about this amongst their parishioners and families, that they think it's definitely something that's missing, and that they'll be adding that. So with that, conclude my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Scully. Commissioner Warnick, do you have any report this evening?
I'm going to keep mine real brief. I only have 3 things. The September 12th, I wanted to bring up the Rising Sun Arts Council has a art show and concert here in Town Hall. The small section of Queen will be closed, and the One-Eyed Jacks, which was the band that closed Sunfest, will be back for their for the final or I guess for the final of the summer event. Yeah, not the final show, but they'll be out here playing on the stage from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. There'll be an art show upstairs, I believe, on the 3rd floor, and then
Food as well.
yeah, I believe there'll be some food vendors and such. So encourage everybody to come listen to the One-Eyed Jacks. They played like I'd say like classic rock, some country, and so it was like probably 80s, 90s kind of music, more or less, but across multiple genres. So, but they were really good. I mean, they were very entertaining at Sunfest. And then the following weekend on September 19th, we have our final movie showing of the year. It's a new release. It'll be released on the 15th, and then on that Saturday, we'll show it. It's Cinderella, not the cartoon version, but the new Cinderella that was it just came out in movies this year, and it's coming out on DVD this, I guess, next week or shortly thereafter. And then the final thing is, in our parks, we have a tree planting that'll be occurring sometime around the end of September. I don't have an exact date yet, but it'll be probably the 23rd or the 30th. We previously had a bunch of volunteers from, and I mentioned before, I guess last meeting, that a bunch of volunteers, some of them from Rising Sun High School, came out and did some maintenance over at the dog park. This planting will be, and we're focusing, the next event at Veterans Park. So we have some clearings in the wood line that we'd like to enclose a little bit for our new trail system. So, and with that, I'll conclude my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Warnick. Is there anything coming before the board this evening? Anything else?
I got one more thing. Want to remind everybody about Plumpton Park Zoo's Brew at the Zoo this weekend. They've really turned that place around from what it was, so come out and support them. Attended 2 years ago, and it was a great time. It rained on us, so it was a muddy time, but food, beer, animals. Can't beat it.
With that, can I get a motion to adjourn this evening?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.